Okay guys, we're going to be doing problem 3.8b right now. This can be found on page 353 of your book, and this is very similar to a problem you're going to be doing for your homework, so I thought that it would be a pretty good one to work just to kind of help you through and help you know kind of what you should be doing as you're trying to work through this problem and as you're trying to gain an understanding of the way that self-employment tax works. So in the previous video we talked about FICA tax, which is comprised of our OASDI or Social Security tax and the HI or the Medicare tax. Okay, so we talked about this last time. If you're an employee, you're going to have 6.2% of your pay is going to be subject to the Social Security tax up to a maximum amount of $110,100. Once you've reached that amount, once your wages reach that amount, you're no longer subject to the Social Security tax. Same thing we talked about last time with Medicare. There is no maximum amount, and every dollar that you earn is going to be subject to this 1.45%. But what if you don't? What if you're self-employed? You work for yourself. You know, you're not an employee of anybody. Maybe you own your own business. Maybe you do construction work. Whatever it is that you might do, if you're not employed by somebody else, you have to pay both the employer and the employee side. I don't know if I touched on this enough in the last video, but this 6.2% is the employee half, and then there's the employer half. So whenever you're having 6.2% withheld from your paycheck for Social Security, your employer is having to pay the other 6.2%. So if you're self-employed, you have to pay both halves of it. So 6.2 times 2% is 12.4%. So if you're self-employed, the total self-employment tax is 15.3%, which is comprised of this 12.4% Social Security or OASDI tax. And remember, the Medicare tax is 1.45%, but if you're self-employed, you have to pay both the employer and the employee halves, right? So 1.45 times 2 is 2.9%. If you add 2.9% to 12.4%, you get 15.3%. So now let's talk about this problem here that we're going to work. 3.8b. Says George Parker was paid a salary of $74,700 during 2012 by Umberger Company. In addition, during the year, Parker started his own business as a public accountant and reported a net business income of $38,900 on his income tax return for 2012. It wants us to compute two things. First thing it wants us to compute is the amount of FICA taxes that was withheld from his earnings during 2012 by Umberger Company, and next it wants us to compute his self-employment taxes on the income derived from the public accounting business for 2012. Now I just want to say one thing. As we speak, we're still waiting, or as I'm speaking here today, we're still waiting to find out what the legislation is going to be. Currently, right now, you remember in the last video we talked about how the 6.2, the employee half, was actually dropped down to 4.2. So this the rate we're looking at here for self-employment tax is actually 2% lower right now for January and February, and we're not sure what they're going to do for the rest of the year, but hopefully they're going to keep that reduced for the remainder of 2012, and we're not sure what exactly is going to happen going forward, but we'll know soon enough. Okay, so let's get going here. So our friend George Parker had a salary of $74,000. Okay, $74,000. We established that the amount that he's going to owe on this as an employee is 6.2%, right? He's not above, at this point, the maximum amount of $110,100. So right now, every cent of this is going to be subject to this 6.2% tax. He's going to have to pay this. His employer is going to be paying the other half of that. Okay? Now, for the problems, and I said this in the last video too, we're going to use the 6.2%. We're not going to use the reduced 4.2%, right? So when this textbook went to publish, nobody knew what was going to happen. So we're going to stick with the figures that the textbook uses. So 74,000 times 6.2% gives us $4,631.40. So this is the Social Security tax that would have been withheld from his paycheck. Okay? Now what about the Medicare tax? Well, that's at 1.45%, and we know there's no maximum amount. So if he earns $3 million, $2 million, whatever, less or more than $110,100, it's still all taxed at this 1.45%. So 74,700 times 1.45 is $1,083.15. So this is the answer to part A of the question. How much does he owe in Social Security tax, and how much does he owe, or how much would have been withheld for Medicare tax? Okay, so this is his half of it. Well, now they say in addition to this that he also what does it say that he did? He opened up a business as a public accountant, and his net business income, so the receipts that he had reduced by the cost of operating the business, he was looking at $38,900. Okay? One thing you got to keep in mind when you're working these problems, it's really easy to forget about this maximum amount, and it would be really easy to slip up and continue to get the answer wrong and miss problems, quiz problems, and homework problems simply by forgetting that there's a maximum amount that is applied to the Social Security tax. So let's take a look at how much he's earned this year. He had a salary of $74,700, and in addition to that, now he has this self-employment income of $38,900. Okay, up here we've already calculated the amount of FICA taxes that have already been withheld from his salary of $74,700. Now we've got to figure out what does he have to pay in self-employment tax for this $38,900 that he netted from his accounting work. If we add these two guys together, we get $113,600. Okay, so that's his total income. The maximum amount, like we said before, $110,100. So if we take his total income and subtract out the maximum amount, that means that $3,500 was the amount that was over the taxable amount for Social Security tax. So remember, he earned $38,900 or netted that much from his accounting work, but guess what? $3,500 of it is not going to be subject to self-employment tax because, or I'm sorry, to the Social Security portion of the employment tax because it went over. So the difference between these two, this is the total amount that he earned in his accounting practice, his accounting work. This amount is exempt, so that means $35,400 of his earnings were below this $110,100 Social Security or OASDI maximum. Okay, so now we've established how much of it is taxable self-employment income for OASDI purposes. So we simply multiply it by the percentage, right? Remember, if we go back up top here, 12.4%. So it's really easy. We just say, hey, how much of this self-employment income is subject to Social Security tax? We calculated that number. Oops, I'm sorry, did I scroll down too far? Let's see here. Sorry, I lost my place. Okay, here we are. $35,400. This is the amount that's taxable for OASDI purposes. The rate was 12.4%, so we just simply multiply that amount by 12.4, and we're looking at $4,389.60 is the Social Security tax on his self-employment income. So there's the two parts to the self-employment tax, right? There's the Social Security portion, and then there's the Medicare portion. Well, $38,900, remember, that's the full dollar amount that he netted that he had left over, all of his receipts minus all the cost of doing business for his accounting practice. Okay, so all of that is subject to Medicare tax, or the HI tax, right? So we multiply that by this 2.9%. And remember, this 2.9% is double the 1.45% that we used when we were working the first part of this problem, right? Because we're calculating the self-employment tax, he has to pay both the employer and the employee halves. Okay? So we come down here, we're looking at this 2.9% times $38,900. There's no maximum here at all. Every single cent is going to be subject to this tax, right? 38,900 times 2.9 gives us $1,128.10. So the total self-employment tax that he's looking at in owing because of his work doing accounting work is going to be the total of these two: $4,389.60 for Social Security, $1,128.10 for Medicare or HI. So that's a total of $5,517.70. Okay, so this is the answer to Part B of that question, of question 3.8b. Now, like I said, I think you're going to be doing a 3.8a, very similar. Now, this is above and beyond. This has nothing to do, this is just taking the problem kind of one step further, or looking at it a little bit differently. Let's just say in the problem that all he had was $38,900. Let's say he didn't work for Umberger Company, but instead all he did was work as a public accountant that year. And let's say all he had in net profit from his business was $38,900, right? So let's plug that number in right here. In a salary, he had zero in this little example that I'm making up here. He'd be looking at his total income of $38,900. In this case, there's no maximum amount. He hasn't gone above the $110,100 maximum amount for Social Security tax purposes. So we just simply take the full dollar amount, multiply it by the self-employment Social Security tax rate of 12.4%, and we're looking at a self-employment OASDI tax of $4,823.60. Okay? Now remember, we need to calculate the other half of the self-employment tax, which is the Medicare tax. And so there's no maximum here ever. $38,900 times the rate of 2.9% gives us $1,128.10. In this example, his total self-employment tax is $5,951.70, which is comprised of these two pieces here, right? And so the difference here, the reason I wanted to show you this problem is I wanted you to see what would happen if we didn't have a situation where he was over the $110,000 maximum. So keep in mind, if you're ever out working, there's two ways. You're typically either an employee of a company, or sometimes maybe they want you to work as a contractor for them. And just keep in mind that if you're not an employee, you're going to be responsible for both halves of the FICA tax, right? If you work for somebody, if you're their employee, you pay one half and they pay one half. But if you're not, if you're a general contractor, then in most circumstances, you're going to be paying both halves of that. So just keep that in mind when you're making decisions about, maybe you're trying to decide between two different jobs. So once again, if you have any questions at all, please shoot me an email, and hope you have fun with this. Thanks.